Hey loved ones, I'm Keyosha. It's pronounced Keyosha, meaning key of the ocean. I'm a life coach and a motivational speaker, known for my company Key Coaching, which focuses on self-betterment. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you what I've learned from being a coach. I'll provide you the keys not just to survive, but to thrive. Hey, and welcome back to Wisdom Wednesdays. Today, we will be talking about wait. Grab your notebook, grab your pen. You're going to want to catch some of this documented style because the topic of discussion today is grief. I know nobody wants to talk about grief, but grief is something that is inevitable, especially because we don't actually realize that when we experience grief happens far more frequently than we're aware of. The first example that we think of when we think about grief is the death of a loved one. But grief also exists in the death of a concept, the death of an idea, the death of a dream, and the death of an expectation. The reason why it's important to shed light on the fact that there are many multifaceted aspects of grief is because whenever grief occurs, something that we're already familiar with, and if you're not, I'll brush you up, are the 5 stages of grief, which are first and foremost denial. We don't even want to admit that it happened. And secondly is anger. Third, we experience a feeling of betrayal. And third is bargaining. Even though when you've experienced loss, bargaining isn't necessarily an option. Fourth is depression. And fifth is most favored, acceptance. None of these 5 stages of grief look the same for any one individual. The way that we grieve when we are in denial, angry, trying to bargain, depressed, or accepting can be big outward emotions, big internal emotions, or feel like we are numb and that they are not happening at all, which differs from person to person. But another thing that makes things more unpredictable is the fact that you can't actually expect grief to begin or end at any one point. So if you've experienced the loss of a loved one, the loss of a concept, an idea, the loss of a dream or an expectation, you may start to grieve after shock wears off, which is denial. Days later, weeks later, sometimes months or even years later. And it's very important that we are aware of the concept of grief being in direct correlation to the death or loss of a loved one, but also concepts, ideas, expectations, and dreams, because depending on who you are, that feeling of grief and that loss may be more likely to occur with concepts, ideas, dreams, and expectations. And so even your concept of innocence as a child, losing that when you come to realization of the adult world and things that make it so, are forms of grief. You have to first deny that life is like this, and then obviously be angry. But all of those stages that come after 1 through 5 is something that we're constantly trying to process and metabolize, because we don't have, well, not myself anyway, the ability to see clearly into the future and predict what is going to happen at any given moment. Even if I was psychic to that extent and I was able to see into the future at any given moment, a psychic could also tell you that your future is susceptible to change. And so, I mean, it serves no one to have that concept in your brain, because it's always susceptible to change, but we do. We are dreamers. We're optimistic, childlike, and naive. Thankfully so, or we would have never thought that we could make a plane and fly, or hook oxygen tanks up to ourselves to swim and breathe underwater for prolonged periods of time. These are people who had ideas, concepts. They were dreamers. And then those things came to fruition through their creation and invention, their trial and error aspect of coming to that place where they were real. It happens through the childlike resilience of trial and error. Getting back on that bike after you fall. Standing back up after you fail. Fail. Air quotes for fail, because it's just a lesson, right? That's the reason why I've trained my mind and my offspring's mind to the saying that I think comes from Japanese culture, or maybe karate. Correct me if I'm wrong. Fall down 7, get up 8. Because it's inevitable that you will fall down. The most important thing, though, is to get back up. And so that's the thing that we have to remember when we're experiencing grief. Because the loss of a loved one isn't as simply understood as it is said. The loss of a loved one may mean the loss of somebody that you loved through a breakup in a relationship. It doesn't always mean death. It could mean that you're so angry that that person is dead to you, but grief will come to pass, inevitably so, because that breakup or that rift in the relationship is just as real as losing somebody for the rest of your life. And so you will feel denial. You will feel anger. Some people who have broken up, or family members that become estranged, or friends that actually are foes that you have to sever ties with, they'll try to bargain. You might even try to bargain with previous partners, parents, or pals. But when bargaining doesn't work, depression sets in. It's like a severely strong sense of disappointment. And when you don't give yourself a chance to sit and accept that, then you don't actually reach an impasse where you can receive acceptance. The loss of a loved one, like I mentioned, is multifaceted, but also the death of a concept is. Like I said, the way that you think the world might look, but also an idea, which I feel like happens more now because we think that we're coming up with something and that we're the first person that thought about it, right? And we're like trying to come up with a solution and an invention, and it's really awesome. Like when I was a kid, I invented something called cheese cookies, and I would take cheese and I would put them on a plate and put them in the microwave until they would like fry and then like bubble and become hard and crispy. It's really good. But then I saw chef shows and cheese cookies already existed and they were like in different shapes and things, and it wasn't something that I invented. And so I haven't yet capitalized on it. I was thinking of just selling them in a box like Oreos. Anyways, the point of fact of the matter is that sometimes the death of an idea looks different from person to person, and the death of a dream that you might have, how you want your future to turn out, whether or not it means that you're surrounded by family and people that you love and that you see yourself with a certain person, living a certain lifestyle with a certain amount of children in a specific car, in a spoken of area, or, this is what can cause grief, because not everything will always go as planned. But as long as you're aware that these are areas where we can end up experiencing grief, the more likely you will apply the 5 stages of grief to these areas, because it doesn't only mean that someone died. And so, to make it easier for us to be able to cope or process, metabolize, whichever wording, with grief, we just have to be aware that it is a form of trauma, whether it big T or little t trauma, that subsequently results in us having to go through the 5 stages of grief. And the more accepting we are of that fact, the more likely we will be to allowing it to take its course. Because the last listed type of grief, I think, is the most frequent, like far beyond frequent occurrence. And that is the death or loss of an expectation. And the mind and the body, like the psyche, they don't actually know the difference between like a physical trauma and emotional trauma. Thereby, they also do not know the difference between like the grief and the feeling of loss from a death of a loved one or the death of an expectation. And so the bigger the trauma is, obviously, the more time you should allot to processing it. But the more you realize that the trauma or the grief is going to come, and it might be something small, the easier time you'll have being able to deal with it. Yes, you expected, I don't know, a lobster poutine when you order your brunch from EOB, but then they gave you a lobster crepe and you were like, okay, it's not what I was expecting. And then you're like in denial. You're like, yeah, it's like the same, it's food, so it's like the same thing. But it's not the same thing. And then you're just kind of like pissed off, like, why would they give me a completely different thing that I asked for? This is ridiculous. And in certain circumstances, you might even try to bargain, like, hey, can you guys like fix this? Isn't what I wanted, and I tried it, but like, come on, please, like, come on, switch it. Don't charge me, but switch it. But don't charge me, you know? But if, for example, they just refused to bargain with you and they were like, eat the thing you didn't order. We don't care if we didn't meet your expectations. You would then be disappointed to a severe amount. And that might look like depression, depending on how big or little the T trauma is, the grief. And then when you actually give yourself that chance to go through those stages, you will accept what is happening. And be okay with the fact that I've had a death of an expectation with this place or this person or even this experience. But it is what it is. And next time, I'm going to make sure to have winter tires on when I'm driving through America during the winter, because not all of America is warm. And so I know that sounds random, but I had an expectation when I was driving through the States, and it died because it was cold and stormy and dangerous and slippy. And so I had to go through that, no, it's fine, and keep pushing and driving thing, and then being like, stop snowing, quite literally angry with Mother Nature, but bargaining like, come on, please, I'm going to get in a car accident. And then being like, this really sucks. I don't even want to be doing this. I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to pull over and teleport from where I am to where I'm trying to go. But then I was like, this has happened. I can't do anything right now. So I will just try to accept it. And by accepting it, I will tell myself, this is how it is. All I can think of is what I can do differently in the future, which is pack chains or switch to winter tires, right? So be self-aware when you're experiencing anything like the death or loss of a concept, loved one, relationship, idea, dream, expectation, and allow yourself to go through the 5 stages. Make sure that you have a safe space to do so, because denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance are big feelings, and they need a safe space to feel them in. So if you don't know what a safe space is, we'll talk about that in the next episode. Next episode is the season finale, guys. So won't see you for a few weeks, but we'll be back with more beautiful topics. All right. So that being said, song suggestion of the week is Forever by James Blake. Enjoy. And if you found this information useful, like, comment, subscribe, click the links below, and follow me at Keyosha333. Thanks for joining me. Bye.